take the roll.
Krause,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Here.
Erickson. Here. Peschel,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Allison Osby. Here. Palmieri,
Here.
present 7.
All right, Deputy Mayor Krause will lead us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
We come together this evening to discuss the issues that confront our city. May we always seek the wisdom to do things that reflect our concern for the people whom we represent.
So we do have a recommendation from staff to change the order of the agenda and take up item 20-410 at this time and withdraw the ordinance based upon the governor's actions today, extending the statewide mask orders. Is there a motion to take up item 20-410 at this time?
I'd like to make a motion to move ordinance 20-410 to the first item on the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, please take the roll.
Krause,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson. Aye. Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby. Aye. Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right. So is there a motion to withdraw 20-410 from this evening's agenda?
I'll make a motion to withdraw item number 2410 from the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion on removal?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Mugrower.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whether City Attorney Lawrence or City Manager Roloff wants to chime in, I think just to let the people in the audience and those at home know what we're doing. Due to the governor's order this afternoon, we've been advised that staff suggests that we pull this from our agenda, that we don't take this up for action or discussion this evening, and that instead we pull it and basically for the last 2 months it's been sitting on the shelf if we needed it. If someone on council wanted to bring it back, that's what would happen again going forward, that if a council member so chose to request it come back, that then it did so at that time. But until then, we'd pull it and not take action tonight. Is that about right, City Manager?
If we had received this order on Friday, you wouldn't have even seen it on your agenda. Is that, was that?
I think so. I just wanted to make sure for those in the
Yeah.
audience and those at home why we're
So because
why
of
we're
that-
doing, because we had some people that obviously came that wanted to speak tonight. So
City Attorney reviewed it and feels it's appropriate to withdraw it at this time, and we can bring it back at another time if necessary.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other council members wish to speak, discuss that? Please take the roll.
Krause,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson. Aye. Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby. Aye. Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, the item is removed from the agenda. Thank you to anyone who may have come this evening to speak on this matter. We appreciate your interest, and but since the item has been removed from the agenda, we will be moving on to public comment, only addressing items that are on the agenda at this time. Aside from the item that was removed from the agenda, City Clerk, is there anyone registered to speak on specific items? And I would ask that if you are speaking, you speak clearly into the microphone. Do we have anyone registered for specific items on the agenda, remaining items?
I have no one else registered.
And so we probably have folks here that are leaving because they had thought that there would be discussion. Looks like there are a few remaining folks, a couple of folks not wearing masks. We do have alternative options for you to participate in the meeting. If you would like to, there's a phone-in capability. There's also online options. So if you'd like to participate in the meeting and you have reasons for not wearing a mask, we would prefer that. Thank you for coming. Give folks a little more time here. So seeing that we have no one registered to speak on remaining agenda items, we still have folks remaining here unmasked. I guess we need to call a little recess.
I'd like to make a motion to have a 10-minute recess.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Mugrauer.
The reason for that, is there a reason for the recess at this moment? It seems like it's being real specific to something, but nobody's alluding to it over there.
Yeah, so we do still have some time for folks to exit, and I'd like to consult with city attorney on an item. Please take the roll on recess.
Krause,
Aye.
Ungerauer,
No?
Erickson. Aye. Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Allison Osby. No. Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 4-3.
All right, 5-minute recess. agenda. Do we have any registered email comments for consent agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay. Take a motion and a second on consent.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion on consent? Councilmember Mugrower.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For ease, I'd like to pull agenda item number 12, resolution 20-401.
And we all have to make sure we're up at our mics because the acoustics aren't so great here. Was it 20-401?
Yes, please, number 12, 20-401 to pull. And then, if I could, I just want to make a comment on number 14. So number 14 is resolution 20-403. This is approving a stipulation with Fox Valley Pro Basketball that Fox Valley Pro Basketball has come to the city staff and council and asked for an amendment to their development agreement, as well as we've got to approve some language in terms of our position in the bankruptcy case with them. And I know it's been written about in the press and talked about a little bit, and I just wanted to address one little part of it. You know, the city incurs costs to do a lot of things. TIFs are no different. So anytime somebody comes to the city and wants to do something and have a TIF in place, you know, we have legal counsel address it internally. We also have external legal counsel that looks at and advises. And the costs incurred under this are no different than any other TIF that we've approved in recent memory or even longer memory. This one just happened to be just some more legal activity than most and more than desired. The city of Oshkosh this council, I think, is doing our best to make sure that we're protecting every single dollar for the citizens of Oshkosh as best as we know how and as best as we can. And at the end of the day, sometimes it's just the cost of doing business that we incur some additional costs on some developments. And that's what this one is, that I think it's about roughly $25,000 that we're gonna have, that we have some legal expenses in regards to the arena and the TIF agreement we have with them in the development agreement. So just wanted to address that. I know there's some questions in the public and in the media regarding that, but honestly, it's the cost of doing business, and we did well to get as much as we've got, given the circumstances. So I just wanted to address that.
And then, did anyone else have items on the consent agenda that they wanted to question or pull? All right, so we will vote on consent agenda minus 20-401. Please call the roll.
Krause,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson. Aye. Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby. Aye. Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
Okay. Do I need a motion and a second to bring 401 back on?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Mugrower.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Mr. Fitzpatrick, if you wouldn't mind coming up, I just have a couple of questions. I think it's important to talk about this. I know sometimes things have to move fast in terms of agreements and contracts and things like that. And so this might be our only whack at this, that delaying it may not be an option in terms of the implications of delaying it. So I've got questions. And I know you and I and City Manager Roloff, we briefly discussed some of this. This regards to our health insurance contract for 2021 with our employees, with the City of Oshkosh employees. I know myself, not that long ago, I was a bit critical of another governmental entity locally in regards to their health insurance plan and what they offered and the choices they made for their employees. And I think it'd be hypocritical if I wasn't equally as critical of my own plan and in our plan. So for 2021, staff has proposed that we agree to a plan that's about a 7% health insurance increase, while we had options to potentially reduce costs. It would require obviously a change in provider. Can you talk to us just a little bit about the pros and cons, the cost-benefit analysis? As I mentioned to you, the potential savings is large. We're talking, I think in the end, potentially about 1.7 million swing if we chose to do the other way. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and why this was recommended over a potential savings?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We go out to bid regularly on our health insurance plan, and this year was no different. We worked with our consultants to take a look at what might be available in the marketplace. And unfortunately, we really didn't have a lot of folks that were interested in our business this cycle. We had some pretty high-cost claims, and I think that contributed to the fact that they weren't interested. We did have one vendor that did bid, and their bid was less than the proposed, our existing partners. I think it was about 5% less at that point. And then we weren't, we took a look at all the pros and cons, and I can get into that right now, Councilmember Mugrauer. That particular vendor was bidding a different health insurance product. Right now we have a PPO plan. The plan design that they were offering was an HMO. That HMO had no out-of-network coverage. So for example, if any of our employees had any, were traveling or had any dependents that lived out of the area, they wouldn't be able to access any health insurance coverage. There was no additional wrap that was included in that network. It's not really comparable to any of our local employers. So when we took a look at the considerations associated with this, we thought that that could be a negative in terms of our ability to recruit folks and also retain them. The provider access was significantly reduced. We were going to a very narrow network with really only 2 providers as opposed to the existing network that we have right now. Approximately 70% of our employees would need to change physicians, and we thought that was a significant issue, especially now. If you've ever had to change and try to get in with a new doctor, it's pretty tough, and it's really tough to get in right now in consideration of COVID itself. So switching plans, asking our employees to try to get in with a different doctor, and also their dependents, we thought that'd be pretty challenging. Let's see. In addition to that, the offered network they don't offer a plan that aligns with our transit employees. They have a separate plan, and the changes that took place with Acts 10 and 32 didn't affect any transit employees. So what that means is we would have to force them into the plan, and then we'd have to bargain the impact of that. That's just the manner in which it works. So that would be a significant change for them, and it would affect certainly the bargaining process. Our existing partner has been a good partner, and one of the things that we're looking to do in the future is to move forward with potentially being self-funded, because we also operate the Three Waves Health Clinic in conjunction with the county and the school district. And so moving to a self-funded plan would be to our advantage when financially it makes the most sense. It doesn't right now because of some of the high-cost claims that I talked about. But Robin, who is our existing partner, has that option, so it would be seamless. We could move to them and have our existing provider relationship, which is another benefit we considered. We thought, in conjunction with what I mentioned earlier about changing not only the provider network, but also the plan design, especially considering the circumstances right now, we thought that could have a significant impact on our employees, on their morale and the circumstances that they're dealing with right now. So that was another consideration. We thought that because the other provider initially provided an offer and then at the 11th hour came in with this offer that was significantly more, and in consideration of our what we know our utilization is, we don't believe that this is a sustainable relationship that we would have with this partner. I don't want to use the term that they were buying our business, but I think it would be very, very difficult to have a sustained relationship with this partner going forward.
One of the things I think, I can add from experiences I've seen in these situations before, a provider that doesn't do an underwriting to really get a good feel for what our workforce healthcare costs are, once they get that experience and they realize the true costs, they will try to recover the losses they had in that year, and it's usually done by a loss factor. And of course, you always, for the insurer, you want to stay below the 1.0, because that 1.0 is how much you collected in premium versus how much you had to pay out in services. And if it's above 1.0, that means they've lost money. And really, they need to make 7% or so. They need to have a loss factor of really 0.93. I had an experience once where the loss factor was 1.83. So they turned around and basically had to double the rates to make up for what they lost last year and to recover what they needed to recover in the coming year. We know based on our loss ratios this year that we will see a significant increase. I can't guarantee that, but I can tell you from my experience, that's exactly what I've seen in the past. And that increase will swing back our way and make up for what savings we we will get next year. We would get that savings, but then we would also likely look for another provider who would underwrite us. Robin underwrote us. They took a look at our workforce before they signed on with us. They knew what they were getting into, and we want them to be there with eyes wide open so they understand what our workforce is. So we may get some savings. We will get savings in 1 year, but we'll probably lose that and more in 2022. And Mr. Van Gompel and I have been talking about the 22 budget as much as we're talking about the 21 budget, because that's when I anticipate state aid will be significantly reduced. And that's going to be when we're going to need to be identifying savings. We'll be looking the opposite way if we go to this plan and potentially face a significant swing. Plus, if we swing back to another provider, we're going to be whipsawing the employees, going that 70% of our employees are going to have to find a new doctor. And then we'll have to swing them back to a new provider come the new health year. So
That's the only other comment I was going to make, the one that City Manager Roloff just made. So I don't want to drone on and on about it, but I don't want you to think that we took it lightly either. It's a significant decision, and we know that the council is faced with all kinds of difficult budget decisions. So,
Question on the 7% versus the 4.04% increase. Am I reading that correctly? That column has a different set of deductibles and maximum out-of-pockets.
right.
0.04% increase, and it looks like there's not a huge gap in the coverage except if you go out of network. And in fact, it looks like that 0.04%, if I'm reading this right, is less, because this keeps turning on me, it's not in the right position. It's actually less for maximum out-of-pocket on prescription drugs. So help us understand why the 0.04% increase with a $500 difference in the deductible, except for that higher difference, if you go out of network, why that wouldn't be the preferred option.
Well, you touched on some of the changes, the deductible changes, the maximum out-of-pocket changes, there's additional tiers for specialty drugs that are added. That one particular item does, the maximum out-of-pocket for prescription drugs is reduced, but there are other changes associated with that movement, plan design changes. So some of the comments that I made earlier about plan design changes, especially at this particular point in time, would apply to that option also. But also the comment that City Manager Roloff mentioned too, in regard to, he likes to use the term keep his powder dry. I think he and I, and certainly Finance Director Van Gompel, are concerned about what might take place this next budget year, and having the opportunity to make changes when we can, when it's necessary for us to make changes. That's something that we took into consideration too.
So if this was only a one-year thing, would that change not be allowable next year? If this was only a one-year contract, would you not be able to make that change?
This is only a one-year contract.
Right.
We could make that change. We could make that change. That is something that we could accept.
So what's the cost difference between the 7% increase and the 0.04% to the impact?
$533,000 roughly.
And we took a look at that as we're preparing the budget. This is this is never good timing because we're in the midst of doing the budget, and the council gave us some pretty good direction. And my belief is, even with maintaining this contract as we're suggesting, I believe we can meet or exceed what council gave us as their low end on the 3% range. And that's our goal, is to be below 3% as directed, as preferred by council. And I think I think it's still achievable. And then that sets us up for 22 when we need to look for some cost savings in 22, because it's a balancing act of levy limits and expenditure restraint. And I do use the term with staff quite often, we need to keep our powder dry so we have methods to comply with expenditure restraint. If we take all of our expenditure restraint options available to us, we're limiting ourselves to take those expenditure restraint options in future years. And that's the real challenge that we always face. I have to take a look at not just the 21, not the following year's budget, but I have to look 2 and 3 years down the road and put ourselves in a position where we can have some flexibility so that next October, when you're looking at the budget, we have a few options for council to play around with. And this is one I think we can use. I recognize that there could be some cost savings, and I think we can take advantage of those eventually. I just would prefer to wait one more year when, from a budget to budget standpoint, we're really going to need that type of potential savings before we even get started on the budget for 22. So
the only other additional point I would add to what Mark just explained too is, although we can make plan design changes unilaterally after Acts 10 and 32 took place, with the exception of the transit union, I think that could complicate the bargaining process a little bit, because there will be changes to the plan design that could impact the members. So I'm certain that I would hear that argument at the collective bargaining table also, because all of our contracts are open at this point, and we'll be initiating that process, I believe, next week or the week after. So.
Other council members have questions? Please take the roll.
Rousey,
Aye.
Lugarauer,
Aye.
Erickson. Aye. Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby. Aye. Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, we will move on to new ordinances. No action will be taken on items 19 and 20. Ordinance 20-408, amend ordinances pertaining to the Board of Appeals. Plan Commission recommends approval. Did we receive any registered emails on this, on any of these items, Pam?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And ordinance 20-409, various sections, amend various sections of Chapter 30 zoning ordinance. Plan Commission recommends approval. And we did withdraw 20-410. Mr. Davis or Mr. Lyons, is Mr. Lyons still here? No, okay. Mr. Davis, could you just give a brief explanation of the highlights of the amendments?
Do you want me to take the BZA one, Alan?
Sure.
The first one, actually, both of them are cleanup. As we've worked through the ordinance, the zoning ordinance from the change, the rewrite done in 2017, we've found different issues that just need to be cleaned up, corrected. With the BZA, we were preparing to do a training session for them, and it came to our attention there were several provisions related to the Board of Appeals within the code, and in some cases there were slightly conflicting provisions in them. So we're proposing to bring them all into one section and to make them consistent, and there are just a couple of things in those provisions that they placed some burdens on the property owners that we thought it would be easier for staff to address in certain situations, like it asked property owners to tell us whether something was in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And we said, that's probably more an issue for staff to decide, so we switched a few things around like that, which makes it more consistent with our process as well. So I think that's pretty much it on the BZA. Do you want to do the zoning ones?
Yes, and then as far as the zoning ordinance itself, there's a few updates based on that review that we did earlier this year with the city attorney's office. Accessory structures, making sure we've got those clarified to determine setback and area requirements. Some vehicular access standards we wanted to make sure applied. And then there's the applicability provision to make sure that performance standards apply to all properties and uses in the city of Oshkosh, and that applied to bicycle and pedestrian, visibility, off-street parking, exterior storage, and a couple other little minor areas that we wanted to make sure based on case law and state statute we were consistent. So it's mostly terminology that most applicants will not even see, but it helps us when it comes to actually administering the zoning code.
So if I could just ask a little bit more specific then on the exterior storage, what was changed with exterior storage? Was that setback related, or was that only the?
I think it was just the applicability part.
Just the applicability, okay.
Right.
All right. All right, thank you so much. All right, we're at new resolutions. 20-411, approve specific implementation plan amendment for additional parking, shunting areas, and accessory structures at U-Haul 900 North Keller Street. Plan Commission recommends approval. Do we have any registered comments on this item?
I do not.
So I'll need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. Seeing none, please take the roll.
Krause,
Aye.
Blugrower,
Aye.
Erickson. Aye. Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Ellison Osby. Aye. Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, next is council discussion direction of city manager and future agenda items. Future agenda items, workshop on the transitional housing with Department of Corrections and Triniteam, September 29th at 6 p.m. Mr. Roloff.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The Joan Cope with the Department of Corrections confirmed that she'll be able to attend. There'll be at least one other Department of Corrections representative, and there will also be a representative of Triniteam. We had discussed trying to get at least one Triniteam person here in person. I think there would be some benefit to that. And Ms. Cook is trying to do that, and we'll see who we get, but we'll have at least the Triniteam person from, I believe, Eau Claire, where their headquarters is, will be present virtually. I let the representative know who was here several months ago that it was on, and it sounded like some folks wanted to talk about it tonight, but it's on. I wasn't sure if they thought maybe it was up in the air or what their concerns were, but we did have people speak to council at a prior meeting. We have those addresses if they spoke during public comment, and we'll send them a notice in addition to we'll let Ms. Kunde know that we were doing the meeting as well. So she's helping get the word out amongst at least the neighborhood association, as it were, and then we're going to publicize it as well. It'll start at 6 o'clock. It's a fifth Tuesday, so this will be the only item. I will have an agenda for you prior to the end of the week. We had drafted something, actually, several months ago. It was literally just before the pandemic emergency was declared. So we had agreed to it with the Department of Corrections. So we'll get that out. Council normally does not have public input at their workshops, but the council had indicated back in March that they wanted the public to have some ability. I tried to encourage Ms. Kunde to let people know that they could participate virtually, as we've been doing, but I think perhaps certainly it'll be up to council if they want to let a couple representatives perhaps ask questions. But normally the Department of Corrections is used to a format in which questions are submitted and then they're answered. I think given the nature of some of these, that's been their success, and Chief Smith, I think, is familiar with those types of situations that we have for our public information meetings when somebody is placed. So that'll be the plan. And
So you're saying that the format might be a little bit different in that there may be some like representatives from groups allowed to speak, and then also some pre-written questions allowed from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to try to limit it because it is a workshop for council to gain information. But I know that public concerns are an issue. So as long as we get good information flowing, perhaps the questions will address most of those things. So normally cards are distributed. In the virtual world, I think what we'll do is we'll just please submit your questions, and we'll jot them down, and we'll figure out a method so that people who are participating virtually will have that opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor.
Councilmember Peschel and then McGrower.
Sure. I guess my question, Mr. Roloff, relates to the agenda. And so if you could just kind of give us a general sense of how that agenda is going to be set up, what type of placeholders are on it. I mean, I don't generally, this is a workshop, so there's usually not an agenda that goes with it, so I'm just wondering if there's specific elements that you're going to add to that.
We did. We had met with Department of Corrections, and the format is generally going to be introductions from the Department of Corrections about how they select sites so that there's an understanding of what their thought process is. Presentation from Triniteam about how they manage the sites, because I know that's been a concern that the residents expressed. There will be an overview from a legal standpoint about what our limitations and our what rights and limitations we have with respect to that. Zoning issues as they relate to where certain uses are allowed, what districts and things like that. And then get into the Q&A. So it's really gonna, and I believe DOC would do some closing comments based on questions that are received, and then just any kind of closing remarks from them. That's generally what we had agreed to, and
Well, can we flip it around? Can we flip the order around and have the public comment questions first? Because I've been in those sessions on this very topic, and it's extremely unsatisfying. If we could flip it around so that the residents get a chance to ask their questions and share their concerns, similar to what we do here in council, would that be all right with you guys?
it's council's workshop. I would, I think I'll talk to Ms. Cook about it. That's generally what we've done, and I think that's generally what the PD's done, but, I mean, we can certainly entertain that type of thing. Sometimes they try to answer the question before they're asked, but if the question gets repeated, then it's like, well, I already answered that, and then it makes it look, it's a little
All right,
awkward, so.
Councilmember McGuire and then Councilmember Allison Asby.
Actually, on this topic, and I didn't want to interject too much on this one, I just wanted to let council know I won't be able to attend that
okay.
workshop. I have work commitment that I'll need to attend to, but then after this topic, I have one more to discuss.
Councilmember Asby, Allison Asby.
Thank you. You know, obviously, this was something that I had brought up months ago, so I'm happy to see it on the agenda and that we're moving forward. But the purpose of this and the reason why originally I had brought it up was to start a discussion. So I would prefer not to have, you know, questions and concerns, because there's a lot of assumptions. And so part of this was to begin a relationship and a dialogue. Now, I think there's an appropriate time for that, but perhaps is it maybe midway or maybe after initial. But I don't know that starting off on that, when we have invited guests in order to have the conversation, is necessarily the right route to go. Again, I agree, there's a time and place for it, but let's remember that the spirit of this is to get the dialogue going so that we can look to see what are, and if there are better future solutions for placement.
I misunderstood the original request, Councilmember Allison Asby, so I'll pull my idea back. I was under the impression that the neighbors, and I had spoken with a couple of them, were very interested in having their concerns, so.
Oh, and absolutely, I'm
Yeah.
saying there's a time and place for it, but let's be positive and start it off on the right foot.
All right, so looks like
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember McGuire.
Thank you. For a future agenda item, I'd like it on the next agenda for us to discuss as a council discussion. I'd like for us to have the discussion on adding the general comment period back to our meetings. I think it's worthy of us having a discussion at this point, having added some additional commentary features for the people at home and those that would like to interact with us. So I think it's appropriate for us to at least have a discussion on it.
And I'd like to add a future agenda item as well, potential for discussing reduction of capacity in bars and restaurants with regard to our current circumstances, separate and distinct from any mask ordinance. Anybody else? Okay, report on council liaison for boards and commissions. Lindsay, Councilmember Erickson, and then Ford.
Thank you.
Hello down there.
Very far away. We had a transit advisory board meeting last week, and one of the recommendations that was brought to the board was for a free transit, free fare day on November 3rd, which is election day. So that was recommended by the board, and I did talk with City Manager Roloff and Transportation Director Collins, and they do plan on implementing that. recommendation. So stay tuned, that'll be coming out. So free fares for Go Transit on Election Day for November 3rd. And we do have an opening on Transit Advisory Board. So if there's any residents who are interested in applying, we have an opening. So you can find the application on the city's website. That's it.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes, we had Plan Commission, and two things came up. We had an individual, actually a construction company, come and beg forgiveness after doing work without a permit and asking for that permit. And that's something that happens fairly regularly. It drives the Plan Commission nuts. So just a reminder to, if you're going to do construction work on your home, or if you're a company doing work, call planning first, pull that permit first. It's a lot easier. The second thing that came up was regarding the specific implementation plan we just approved at the U-Haul site. Concern was expressed about the Plan Commission's role in evaluating, in this case specifically, the environmental impacts on Sawyer Creek. So just want to bring that up, that was a pretty in-depth discussion we had about what is Plan Commission's role regarding sustainability, and to what extent should other boards and commissions be involved in that role.
All right, I have a couple updates. Let's see here, Redevelopment Authority, we did have a closed session on a couple of properties downtown, some blight, and then we also had a draft presented regarding an urban garden potential program, and a draft of an RFP, which should be coming to us. Would it be next council meeting, do you think, Mr. Davis? The final version?
That'll be going to the RDA, probably at their November meeting.
And following that, we should get it in December, right?
Typically, the RDA issues the RFP. The council doesn't actually issue the RFP.
No, I'm not talking about the RFP part, but the plan itself. The urban garden plan.
Oh, the urban garden plan, the RDA still owns those properties. They could still make those decisions without council approval.
Oh, okay, I see. My mistake. I thought it had to come to us for a final.
RDA can lease that or have an agreement for the community gardens, and they've done that with other projects. The time technically it would come to council is when, or if they need a conditional use permit for the community garden, and that would come to all the way to council. So the actual garden, if we get those proposals, would come to council for the conditional use permit.
So we have about 5 properties that
Yes.
were identified by staff and recommended that different groups, entities, organizations could apply in this the draft says non-deadline RFP process to use those sites. And
Yes.
they're kind of spread across the city, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Mubrauer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any boards and commissions to report on, but I do, since this is an appropriate time, I do have a brief statement I want to make. This in regards to something that occurred earlier in the evening. And I won't take too long to talk about this, but I'm a bit disappointed by something that occurred earlier in the evening. We took a brief recess at the request of the mayor because there was a few of the attendees at this meeting this evening that were not wearing masks. And I'm a bit troubled by the reasoning behind it. So I'd like to read 2 things here. One, Governor Evers' order signed today, this afternoon, order number 1, emergency order number 1. There are exemptions for wearing masks. Individuals who have trouble breathing, individuals with medical conditions, intellectual or developmental disabilities, mental health conditions, or other sensory sensitivities that prevent the individual from wearing a face covering. There are exemptions to wearing wearing face masks. I have no problem with face masks. I want to point that out. I've got no issue with those who choose to wear or not to wear. I really don't. But I'm a bit disappointed in the attempt to shame those who came here to engage with us. I look back almost exactly, I think it was exactly 9 weeks ago, the mayor issued a proclamation, yourself issued a proclamation. And in that proclamation, you requested that everyone show patience and respect for all persons. I'd remind you to show patience and respect for them as well. So I'm disappointed. I think you feel like you may have won this evening, but unfortunately you have failed. So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you for that input, Councilmember Mugrauer. And I think I was very patient and very respectful and asked nicely. So I disagree with your observation, but you're entitled to your opinion. Next, city manager, announcements and statements. Mr. Roloff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple items in your agenda packet. The first one, I'm happy to report that we've selected a consulting firm to assist us with diversity, equity, and inclusion training internally for staff. Firm FEI, they're based in Atlanta, but also have an office in Milwaukee. The Milwaukee-based office will be providing the consultant services for us. Ms. Benke, Mr. Fitzpatrick, and I had an opportunity to meet with Terry Howard, the principal who will be working with us on this. I was very impressed with her experience. She does have some familiarity with the Fox Valley. She went to school for a time up here and told me some stories about some places she visited as a college student, so she knows Oshkosh pretty well from what I heard. Well, with that said, she has a great deal of experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion training. The firm and her have both done work for organizations as large as New York City, the state of Minnesota, and Dane County. So they've got a good breadth of experience, as well as many smaller agencies in both the governmental, nonprofit, and private world. I'm excited to work with Ms. Howard, and I think she'll mesh well with our staff, and we're looking forward to it. Happy to answer any questions you might have about that, but we're pleased that we're going to be able to move forward with that. The other one is this is something that staff, myself specifically, have the ability to do with our COVID-19 emergency. The temporary use permits were actually set to expire in the next few weeks. I felt it was appropriate, hoping that we have a little some fall days like the ones we're having now, allowing the businesses that are still doing some outside seating to continue to enable them to do that. And if there's some early warm spring that they want to take advantage of, get them through the spring, the early spring, and then we can see where we are at that point about extending the temporary use permits. Most of them will probably close up exterior stuff after, after October 31st anyway, but this gives them the ability that if something comes up in early spring, you get a nice, 70-degree day in March, don't we all wish, that they can do something and they don't have to come back to us because they've already been permitted to do it. So we think that was appropriate to do. We have something in there for geotechnical exploration for our 2021 CIPs. We get moving on that so that we're ready to go out and bid during the winter and get the best rates possible for our public works contracts. Outstanding issues update, the biggest one was the 1105 Jefferson. Happy to report that. I'm going to skip over COVID-19 update because we do want to spend a tiny bit of time on that. And just a reminder, October 13th at 5 p.m., council portrait. The reason we're having it as early as we are having it is because of the technological challenges with getting everybody in a picture but being socially distant. We're going to let the magic of Photoshop work, but please show up in your school day picture best. You'll probably be photographed individually, but you'll be surprised as who is sitting next to you when we're all done. But if you could do that, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but I took a look at our senior department head who has never been in one of the photographs because we started adding different department heads a few years ago, and we will be joined on the dais by Museum Director Brad Larson for this year's photo. So happy to report that. Lastly, COVID update. Is Mr. Garrett still here? Okay, Mr. Guerin left. We had our weekly Emergency Operations Center meeting this morning, and Mr. Guerin gave us some detailed information. As you know, it was actually during the course of our morning meeting that we confirmed that the school district has announced that for at least through October 8th, they will be going virtual. A lot of it has to do with staffing on their part and the number of people that have had to be quarantined. The numbers are rising significantly in Oshkosh. They're certainly, and in Winnebago County. The biggest part is certainly in the 18 to 24 range, but it's not limited to that. This is community spread. This is not just the university, although every university town is getting impacted like we are. It is a challenge, but it's not solely that. And Chief, from your standpoint, we're in full-fledged community spread on this issue. It's not because of the schools, although it's a contributing factor, and it's not the grade schools. In fact, they're concerned about the kids bringing it in, not necessarily it's there at school, but if we don't do something to slow down the spread, we're going to have some more significant issues.
And I guess I have a question on that. So council received a copy of email from an individual who operates, she and her daughter operate as a stand at the farmer's market, and proudly do not wear masks as they're serving customers. I guess question for you or Chief Stanley. I did forward that on to the health department, but is that something, what do you think about that? What is the city to do with an event that we've approved with specific, requests and requirements? I know it's outdoors, but they are serving, and I think the farmer's market premised that vendors would be, following certain measures. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's appropriate to have our special events coordinator contact the manager of the market, because that is a rule of the market, and ask them to deal with it as appropriate. They've made a rule that all their vendors need to be masked, and my observations have been that the vendors, for the most part, have been very compliant. Customers, not so much, but definitely the vendors. If this person is not complying, I think we ought to let the market manager know. And they were pretty brazen in there. I'm not wearing a mask, and I don't need to. So we'll have the market manager deal with it, because they're the ones that made that pledge to us. Chief? Meanwhile, Chief, anything else? Yeah, get the mic down.
The only thing that I would point out is we still continue to have a community testing site at Sunnyview Expo Center. The address there is 500 East County Road Y. Tomorrow they'll be open from 8 to 4. They have some varying start times and end times throughout the week to accommodate people that may want to go after work or later in the day. And they're also open on Saturday. That's available on the county's website. It gives all the hours and gives you an option to register ahead of time to expedite your experience. So in addition to all the normal routes through your healthcare provider, we still have that option of community testing available. Again, just to reiterate what City Manager Roloff said, we've continued to see a high rate of rise. That rate of rise that we feared would happen in April, May, and what was predicted to happen in some of the modeling, we're seeing now. So that is a absolute steep, straight up increase right now. But the hockey stick shaft was a little longer than we thought it would be, but the modeling was it was going to go straight up, and that's where we're at now.
The other item that the mayor and I talked about this morning, I think that, and I'm sorry Mr. Guerin didn't stick around. I think after the mask ordinance got pulled, he thought it was time to go. Contact tracing is a major challenge with the health department. And I was reading an article that said there's probably about 7% of contact tracing staff available. It's the demand is so high and so necessary for contact tracing. And that's just merely getting a hold of people who have tested positive and say, who else have you been in contact with, so we can let them know. And that's not getting done as well as it should be. That is absolutely a concern for Mr. Guerin and the health department. So I will certainly make a plea. If there are people who are looking for some temporary work, you do not have to have any contact with anybody who's COVID positive. It's really more getting in touch with them. The mayor talked about there are some people who have expressed concerns, legitimately so, that they're not sure when they get a call that it's legitimately somebody who's a true contact tracer or some
Yeah,
type
that's
of.
why I was hoping we could get some, answers from health department, or maybe, I don't know, Chief Stanley or Chief Smith have any input on how one would, I guess, verify that somebody contacting them is legitimately a contact tracer as opposed to some kind of scam.
I think it's appropriate to ask Mr. Guerin that question, and that's why I'm sorry he's not here to answer it, because they have responsibilities to let people know how and why they're legitimate. But obviously, some people are concerned about that, and if they're not providing the information, they're not helping connect the dots. And this is really all about connecting dots, because if you've tested positive and we don't know who else you've been in contact with, we can't get in touch with those people to say, you may want to get a test. And so it's very valuable to get that done. So certainly making a plea for contact tracing. We're going to have our folks assist the health department any way we can to get the word out that if you can help and be a contact tracer, you get paid for it. It's just a matter of getting those people and get some training on it as well. Chief, anything else?
I guess
That's all I
just
have,
a
ma'am.
quick question on that COVID update then. So we did speak briefly before about the virus shedding sewage samples available for city sampling, but it appears that the university is now doing that and using that as a predictive for potential symptoms, outbreak. Are we any closer as a city to being able to do that, since they are doing some of that testing right there on campus, I believe, right? I know it's UWM umbrella, but
Yeah, as I had mentioned previously, we are participating with the State Lab of Hygiene, and we will continue to participate in that study for as long as they are willing to have us.
so we are submitting samples now.
I haven't followed up with staff to see if they've gotten everything that they need from the state lab to begin doing that since our last conversation, but I can do that and let you know. But last time we had submitted everything we needed, and we were just waiting for instructions.
So is the thought that, like, let's say, for example, we had that available to us now, they could kind of zero in on particular hot spots?
No, they would just be doing sampling at the treatment plant. We do not have the staffing nor capability to go out into the collection system to do that type of tracing right now.
So help me understand that. How is the university able to do that and separate it out between dorms and or other locations, but we're not?
Because they have about 8 sites they have to test. We have a collection system of over 300 miles and many thousands of manholes.
I see. Thank you.
That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
All right?
Aye.